am Olivia. Married but in love with Leo, a very handsome man, tall and sweet. I cheated on my husband Greg with Leo. It was a beautiful moment. I felt important and noticed, but I did a wrong thing. God forgive me. Greg noticed and decided to set me up. It was real. He did set me up with 4 men pretending to be armed men. I was ripped off. I was shattered. It was the darkest moment of my life. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, do well to subscribe, like, and hit on notifications. To all my returning subscribers, thanks for stopping by. Let us begin. They say a woman knows when her marriage is over. For me, it wasn't some loud, explosive moment. It was quiet, like a slow leak in a tire, barely noticeable until you're stranded on the side of the road, wondering how you missed all the signs. Greg and I used to be magic. He was charming in that ambitious, focused way, a man of order, control, logic. He built his career from the ground up. Financial analyst turned investor, always a sharp suit and sharper words. And I loved him. God, I did. But somewhere between conference calls, board meetings, and quarterly reports, he stopped looking at me like I was the woman he fought to win. I became part of the furniture. Present. Predictable. So when I met Leo, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just trying to feel something again. It started innocently, if that word still holds any meaning for what would follow. I had just joined a new gym downtown. Greg had been urging me to get a personal trainer, subtly suggesting I tone up, as if I were one of his portfolios. Leo was the trainer assigned to my evaluation session. Mid-20s, tan skin, a jawline like it had been sculpted, and this casual confidence that wasn't arrogance, it was just magnetism. You're Olivia, right? Let's see what we're working with, he said that first day, his voice smooth but playful. And I laughed. I actually laughed. For the first time in months, maybe years, someone looked at me, not through me. Leo paid attention. He noticed how I liked ice water instead of room temperature, that I stretched a little longer when I was anxious, that my wedding ring left a callus on my finger I kept rubbing without realizing. Our sessions grew longer. He'd flirt, lightly at first, like he was testing the water. And I'd flirt back. God help me, I did. It was like watching a match flicker in a dark room. I told myself it was harmless. Just a crush. A reminder that I was still desirable. Still alive. One afternoon it shifted. I stayed after the gym closed, waiting for Greg to pick me up. He was late again. Leo was finishing his rounds, and we ended up in the smoothie bar, alone. You always wait on him? He asked, sipping his protein shake. I gave a small laugh. Yeah, he gets busy. It's fine. Leo looked at me for a long second. You're too beautiful to wait around like that. I should have said thank you and left. I should have laughed it off. I should have remembered I was a married woman with a mortgage and a life. But instead I met his gaze and said, I don't feel beautiful anymore. He didn't say a word, just reached across the counter and touched my hand. Not sexually, just like I was something delicate and important. That was the spark. The first kiss came 2 weeks later, in the back stairwell of the gym. He pulled me into him with the kind of hunger that made me gasp. His hands were firm, sure. There was no hesitation, no guilt. Just heat. I remember thinking, this is wrong, even as I leaned into him. Even as I let myself fall. It escalated from there. Hotel rooms during the day. Late-night drives to parking lots no one used. Text messages that made my skin flush just reading them. I told Greg I was taking yoga classes. Joined a fake book club. I created lies so smoothly I scared myself. Leo made me feel alive. Desired. Reckless. He was a fire I didn't know I'd needed. But even in the haze of lust, I knew it couldn't last. He was young, wild, unattached. I was someone else's wife, playing a game I didn't fully understand. Still, I kept going back. Because every time Leo touched me, I remembered the woman I used to be. The one who had dreams, confidence, danger in her smile. The one Greg had forgotten. Then came the night Greg looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You've been glowing lately. What changed?" I nearly dropped my fork. For a second I thought he knew, that he was about to throw the truth in my face. But he just smiled and went back to his food. That was when I realized Greg wasn't stupid. He was just quiet, watching, calculating. The spark that lit the fire was real, but I didn't know yet that it would consume me. It's strange how silence can feel like thunder. After that night at dinner, when Greg said I was glowing, something inside me curled up in fear. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a loaded observation, his voice too mild. Greg never said anything without reason. From that moment on, I started to feel like I was being watched. He didn't act angry or suspicious. That would have been easier to deal with. Instead, Greg grew more attentive in all the wrong ways. The way he'd ask about my day, where I went, who I saw, polite, probing questions. Not interrogations, but subtle inquiries laced with quiet intensity. I found myself lying more, stretching the truth, repeating details to keep stories straight. And Greg? He just nodded, listening, eyes sharp like a knife. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know when or how. The first real crack came on a Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in the living room, thumbing through a magazine I wasn't reading. Greg came in with his phone in hand, a strange stillness to his steps. He sat across from me, one leg over the other, and placed the phone on the coffee table between us. The screen was off, but his expression wasn't. "Olivia," he said slowly, "when were you going to tell me?" My mouth went dry. "Tell you what?" Greg tapped the phone. The screen lit up. Messages. Photos. Me. Low. Hotel receipts. Screenshots of our texts, ones I'd deleted or thought I had. My breath caught. My world froze. "You hired someone?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once. "Of course I did. You think I didn't notice? You think I wouldn't dig when my wife suddenly starts coming home late, smiling at her phone, wearing perfume to yoga class?" Shame rushed up like bile in my throat. I reached for words, for explanations, but there were none. It was all there in black and white. The affair laid bare. I never meant to," I stammered. "Spare me." He cut in, voice low but calm. "Don't insult both of us." There was a silence that stretched on for too long. I felt naked under his gaze, exposed in every sense. I wanted to cry, to scream, to apologize. But I didn't even know where to begin. "I guess I was lonely," I finally said, my voice trembling. "You stopped seeing me, Greg. I needed to feel like I mattered again." He studied me, and for the first time I saw something raw flicker in his eyes. Not just anger, betrayal. Hurt. "I gave you everything," he said. "I worked my ass off so we could live comfortably, so you didn't have to want for anything. And you gave this back to me." I looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "What happens now?" I asked. He leaned back, resting his elbow on the armrest. Now I think. I decide what kind of man I want to be in response to the woman you've become." That sentence chilled me. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things or storm out. He just got up, picked up his phone and walked away. That night he didn't come home. Leo, of course, knew nothing. When I told him Greg had found out, he just laughed. "So what? He'll get over it." "No, Leo. You don't understand," I said, panic rising. "Greg doesn't just get over things. He absorbs them, files them away, and then he moves carefully, precisely. Leo didn't get it. He was too young, too naive. He didn't know what it meant to live with a man like Greg, strategic, deliberate, and wounded. In the days that followed, Greg acted normal. Too normal. He returned home, went about his routines, even brought me flowers one evening. But there was something hollow behind it all. The way he looked at me was different. Not with love or even hatred, but with detachment. As if I were an item on a list he needed to deal with. I asked if he wanted therapy. He said no. I asked if he was planning to leave me. He said, eventually. That word echoed in my head. Eventually. It was worse than now. It meant something was coming, but I wouldn't know when or what. One night, I woke up and found him standing by the window, staring out into the dark. "What are you doing?" I asked, half asleep. Thinking, he said without turning, about how much pain a man can tolerate before he breaks. I sat up slowly, a knot forming in my chest. Greg, I loved you, he said, voice flat. I still might. But something's changed, Olivia. And once it changes, it never goes back. The room fell into silence. In that moment, I realized that I had shattered something sacred. Not just trust, but the image Greg had of me. I was no longer his wife. I was a puzzle missing pieces. A betrayal he hadn't seen coming. And now he was planning something. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it coming. And whatever it wasn't going to be forgiveness. They say vengeance is a dish best served cold. I used to think that was just a poetic way of saying someone could be petty. But Greg? He served it cold, calculated, and surgical. Started with an invitation. He told me he wanted to spend the weekend together at a secluded lake house upstate. A chance to reconnect, he said. To talk without distractions. He even smiled when he said it. A real one, or at least it looked real. I wanted to believe it. I wanted so badly to believe he was willing to try, even after everything. So I packed a bag and followed him. The lake house wasn't ours. It belonged to one of his clients, he told me. A private place tucked into the woods, surrounded by still water and silence.
No neighbors.
No signal.
No escape.
We arrived Friday evening. He cooked dinner, steak and red wine. We talked like we used to. Small things. Our first vacation. The restaurant where he proposed. For a few hours I allowed myself to forget the tension lingering beneath every word. I allowed myself to hope. Then the night turned. After dinner, Greg poured me a second glass of wine, then turned on music, old jazz, the kind he used to play when we first started dating. He offered to give me a massage. His hands moved across my shoulders gently, almost lovingly. I closed my eyes, leaning into him. I want you to go to the bedroom, he whispered into my ear. And wait there. I have a surprise. My heart fluttered. God, was this his way of reclaiming something? Us? I nodded, kissed his cheek and walked upstairs. I changed into the silk robe he packed for me and sat on the edge of the bed, nervous, hopeful. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I heard nothing. And then footsteps. Heavy ones. Multiple. I stood up just as the door opened. 4 men entered. Strangers. Tall. Masked. I froze. What the hell is this? I asked, panic rising. They didn't answer. Behind them, Greg walked in, calm as ever, holding a drink in his hand. He leaned against the doorway, his expression unreadable. Greg, I whispered. They're actors, he said casually. Professionals. I paid them well. My stomach dropped. For what? He took a sip of his drink. For a performance. You like excitement, don't you? Drama. Intensity. One of the men moved toward me, and I backed up instinctively. Stop. I shouted. This isn't funny. They're not going to touch you, Greg said coldly. Not really. But you won't know that. Not right away. My breath caught. My heart thundered in my chest. This is your punishment, he continued. Not because you cheated, but because you lied. Because you made me feel like a fool. Greg, please, I begged, voice trembling. Don't do this. But he only nodded to the men. What followed was a psychological nightmare. They didn't touch me. Not once. But they surrounded me, barked commands, made threats. They were actors, yes, but method actors. Deep in character. I was pushed down, shouted at, humiliated. My robe was torn. My dignity shredded. All while Greg stood and watched from the corner, silent. Eventually it ended. The men left. One gave Greg a curt nod as he passed. And then it was just the two of us again. I curled into a ball on the floor, sobbing. Greg walked over and crouched beside me. He didn't touch me. Just looked. That's how it feels, he said softly. To have your trust taken. Your safety ripped away. To feel small. Powerless. Like a fool. I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face. You're a monster. He didn't flinch. You made me one. That night, he slept soundly in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning he was back to normal. Coffee, eggs, polite conversation. He offered to drive us home like nothing had happened. I said nothing. My voice had abandoned me. The ride back was quiet, but in my head I screamed the whole way home. The hardest part wasn't the fear. It wasn't even the shame. It was waking up the next morning and realizing that the man I had shared a life with, built a home with, dreamed with, had looked me in the eyes and orchestrated my humiliation like it was a stage play, and then gone back to eating eggs and reading the paper like he hadn't just broken something in me that could never be repaired. Greg never brought up the lake house again. Not once. And I didn't dare to. We returned to our suburban cage, pretending that everything was the same, that we were still a husband and wife, not just two ghosts haunting the same walls. I went through the motions, keeping my head down, my voice quiet, my guilt tucked behind a hollow smile. But inside I was unraveling. The nightmares came fast and often. Sometimes I'd wake up to Greg standing beside the bed, just watching me. Other times, I imagined those men in the shadows of the hallway, just beyond the bedroom door. Even though I knew it had all been staged, the damage was real. My sense of safety had been ripped away. And what remained was something ugly. Resentment wrapped in remorse. I tried to call Leo once, just to hear a voice that reminded me of something lighter, something less cruel. But his number was disconnected. I never heard from him again after the fallout. He vanished, just like the thrill, just like the fantasy. That stung more than I expected. Without him, I was left with nothing but the ruins. Greg began spending more time out of the house. Late meetings, overnight conferences. He no longer cared about explanations. He wasn't hiding affairs. He was daring me to guess. I never asked. I didn't have the strength to demand loyalty from a man I had betrayed first. He filed for divorce 2 months later. The paperwork arrived on a Tuesday, folded neatly in a cream envelope, sitting on the kitchen counter like a casual note.
No dramatic confrontation. No final conversation.
Just a document, cold and precise like everything Greg did. I signed it in silence. By the end of the summer, the house was sold. We split the assets. He gave me less than he promised when we married, but more than I deserved. In truth, I would have taken nothing just to be free of him. I moved into a small apartment downtown. 1 bedroom. A sliver of a balcony that overlooked a parking lot. No lake views.
No marble countertops.
Just space. And silence. For weeks, I didn't speak to anyone. I avoided familiar faces, ghosted old friends, dodged the polite questions from people who'd heard rumors. I buried myself in routine, coffee, work, sleep, repeat. Anything to keep from remembering. But memory has teeth. It bites when you least expect it. Sometimes I'd see a man at the gym, who moved like Leo, and my heart would skip. Other times I'd smell Greg's cologne on someone in an elevator, and I'd flinch, my body remembering that weekend even if my mind wanted to forget. And yet in the rubble, something strange began to grow. Clarity. For the first time in years, I had no one to lie to, no one to impress. I didn't belong to a man, or to a marriage, or to some artificial image of a perfect life. I was just Olivia. Damaged. Flawed. But real. I started therapy, told my story in bits and pieces, admitted the things I did, the things that were done to me. My therapist didn't judge. She didn't excuse my affair. But she didn't justify Greg's revenge either. 2 wrongs don't create justice, she said once. Only deeper wounds. I held on to that. In the quiet of my new life, I found moments of peace. Small things. Walking barefoot on the balcony at night. Cooking for myself. Reading books I used to love before I became someone else's shadow. I stopped wearing my wedding ring. Not just because I wasn't married anymore, but because I was ready to stop punishing myself. One rainy evening, I passed by the lake house while driving back from a friend's place. I hadn't meant to. Just happened. The woods looked the same. The water still and secretive. And for a moment I thought about stopping. about standing in front of that place one more time and letting it all come back, just to let it go. But I didn't. I kept driving. Because some doors are meant to stay closed. They say playing with fire will get you burned. But no one tells you what happens after the flames go out. You're left with the ashes. And sometimes those ashes are where you start again. Have you ever imagined yourself in this kind of situation? And I know so many things could be going on in your mind. What did you do about it? Subscribe to this channel, like, and hit on notifications for more interesting stories like this.